Every journey begins with a single step. For many, the first step is the greatest challenge. Yet for all, the obstacles, the doubt, and conviction teach us about ourselves. It's these moments in life, a test of our abilities, our mind, when we don't know, but we still proceed, driven by the unspoken, but ignited by the obsession that yields some of life's greatest lessons and rewards. Join me as we explore incredible stories of leaders forging industries, enterprises, and ultimately, themselves. I'm your host, Adam Geary, and welcome to Capital Class. Let's begin.
Classmates, welcome to today's episode of Capital Class. If you're a parent, you know the challenges of finding childcare and early childhood education. As a fellow parent, I can attest the pain is real. What was once a word-of-mouth system has evolved into a highly performing and highly invested industry. Yet as a parent, performance data, reviews, and general information are limited at best. In 2016, two moms, no surprise, decided that enough was enough, realizing that the very tools they were helping to build for commerce and content didn't exist for our earliest learners. Thus, a business was born. On today's episode of Capital Class, we are joined by co-founder and CEO, Sara Moskoff of Winnie, a comprehensive platform for finding childcare in the United States, trusted by millions of parents and providers alike. Sara, welcome to the show.
That was amazing. You have some radio announcer background. That was incredible. That was so good.
Sara, let's start with just the industry for a moment. Early childhood is interesting in that for many, they know it by a different name, right? Daycare. And your platform does cover both sides of, the journey, let's say from birth to kindergarten. Where has the market changed in the last 10 years, like kind of the most profound as you think about it, leading an enterprise through that evolution?
There have been so many changes the past 10 years since we started working on Winnie. I mean, I think one big change just in the overall early education market is just interest and talent. I think it went from being like, I remember in our earliest days, we tried to get a meeting with one investor and they said they don't invest in childcare. That's just not something they would even hear our pitch. And now it's actually a pretty kind of it's not the sexiest industry, but it's an industry that people claim to care about and invest in, even if they don't actually make investments. They say they care about it. And it's definitely attracted a lot more interest from entrepreneurs. There's now a plethora of companies building in the early education parenting space. If you kind of think of the broader parent tech, there's investors that have invested in it. There's private equity that's interested in it. I just think there's a lot more money and talent attracted to the sector, which is great. I think it needs even more, but it's a start from where it was. And then just the level of technology, I think has been up leveled. A lot of these just childcare, early education businesses had no technology even 10 years ago. And now they do rely on technology to run their business. Maybe not as much as I wish they did, but it's a start and they're not turned off to technology. And I think the way they were 10 years ago when we were starting out.
You raise an interesting point about the parent. And I think the bar, at least when I was a child, was someone's neighbor ran a daycare in their basement. And it was safe because the neighbor said it was safe. And it was clean because maybe when mom or dad visited, it looked clean. And that was kind of enough.
Yeah. I mean, back when I was growing up, and I'm going to date myself now, but daycare was kind of a dirty word, childcare in general. My mom was a stay-at-home mom up until I went to high school. And that was way more common. And also, you were kind of seen as like maybe a bad parent if you put your child in like a full-time daycare. Now, I think we are actually starting to see the opposite, where you might be seen as a bad parent if you don't expose your child or give your child an early education prior to them entering kindergarten. It's seen as a good thing, as it should be, to have your child in a group environment where they're learning from a teacher and other children, and being ready to enter kindergarten, like with those kind of social, emotional skills already under their belt. And then whether it's full-time or part-time can be based on, your unique family needs and what you can afford and how much you're working and things like that. But it's actually seen as like, wait, if you didn't enroll your child in anything prior to them entering kindergarten, like that would be weird now. So it has really, the perception of childcare has really shifted, which I think is good.
And parents use your platform probably not only just to find providers, but also to evaluate the quality of those providers.
Yeah. So a big reason why people come to Winnie is like they may know of a daycare or preschool, but they're trying to assess the quality. They're trying to understand if it's licensed and look up that license and see if there's any violations or things they should be aware of. They want to read reviews from other parents. They want to get prices, which is a big reason people come to Winnie, because there's not a lot of price it's like one of the last industries to have price transparency. Like you can get more price transparency on buying a house or buying a car than you can on like what childcare costs. So that's a big reason people come to us, is to try to understand, like, I hear this thing is really expensive. How much does it actually cost? And can I afford it? And we are that has been really slow to move, trying to encourage more childcare providers to be transparent and upfront about their prices. I think it's what's best for consumers and the industry in general, but it's been slow.
On the provider side, I feel as if they are in a almost tightrope situation where I'm on a coalition board where we regulate our respective group, putting children into providers and helping them through that process, right? It's a formalized process in Florida for those listeners. And providers have a lot to manage on a very finite budget. I think people would be surprised at what a provider's operation looks like. From your perspective, having worked with probably thousands across the entire country, from the provider's point of view, like, why open one of these, and what are their kind of greatest headwinds and tailwinds?
So I'm probably going to get canceled for this, but I believe we should stop the conversation around like, oh, childcare is so expensive. How do we make it cheaper? It's such a high cost. It's more than college in some places. And instead, we should say childcare should be expensive. In fact, it should be more expensive because it is incredibly valuable. It's incredibly valuable to parents. It allows them to work. It's incredibly valuable to children. It prepares them for the rest of their life learning. I think it should be more expensive than college. But how do we actually help parents afford that? Yes, that's a big issue we need to solve. And there should be other payers in the system besides parents. Absolutely. There should be government. There should be employers. There should be a whole host of ways that we cover that cost. But I hate the kind of conversation around like, how do we make it cheaper? Because I actually think it is a really expensive service to provide. And it's a really valuable service. So of course it should be expensive. We just need to fill that gap for families so they can actually afford it.
And from the
providers don't have a lot of margin right now. A lot of these businesses are run in a really tight way. A lot of their like revenue is going into paying their staff, is going into the cost of the facilities, is going into kind of the other costs of running the business day to day. And so it's not like they're rolling in the dough. It's not a high margin business.
Yeah. And in every state, it's regulated in most cases by multiple different agencies. It's certainly from my lens, as just one member in this ecosystem, for many of them, you have to love doing this. And if you don't, I can't imagine why you would persist in one of the hardest markets in my view.
Yes, I think it's hard, but like on the flip side, it can be a really rewarding profession. And if you can get the business mechanics right and you can charge what it actually costs you to run the business and, actually make a profit, then it can be a really great business. It's pretty recession proof. Like we saw that during COVID when everything else shut down, childcare didn't. And you're constantly having new customers as long as people keep having babies. Thank you, Elon Musk, for doing your part. But like, I think it is a great business, but what we always tell, especially to like kind of smaller childcare centers or home daycares, is like, you have to make this sustainable. You can't just do it out of the goodness of your heart. You have to make sure you're setting your business up in a way to be successful. Like if people aren't paying, they can't keep getting your service. There's a lot of like home daycare owners that'll be like, oh, but they got laid off. I should just give them like a couple months. Like, no, you need to be able to run this business, because if you go out of business, then everyone who's receiving your care will not be able to receive it. So you have to set your business up like a real business, and that means people have to pay for it. And if you don't pay on time, there are late fees and there are all sorts of things that are what real businesses establish. But as long as you do that, like I do think you can run a really successful business in the space. And we can see that from a lot of the bigger enterprises that are able to make this pretty profitable.
You run a two-sided marketplace.
Yes.
Where you're both the parents and the providers. How do you think about building trust and scale between those groups?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing that we've always done is like, we want this to be a marketplace where you can get information about every childcare provider. And so that's, everyone from like a big enterprise daycare that has hundreds of centers across the country all the way down to a small home-based childcare provider. One thing we've done to make our lives a lot easier is we only work with licensed childcare providers on Winnie. So whether it's a home daycare or a big center, if you're not licensed, we don't have you on our platform. And that does help build a baseline level of trust, because we can kind of build off the backs of all the regulation that already exists. If we were working with individual nannies or babysitters or unlicensed daycares, I think it'd be a lot harder, because we would have to vet every single, daycare on our platform personally. But we can use all of the great regulation that already exists in the States to license daycares. But then I think a lot of it is, allowing parents to write reviews and provide feedback. That's a really important kind of feedback loop. Because even if, it's a licensed daycare that claims to be great, like you really want to hear from what other parents have to say.
The earliest version of Winnie served a very real and personal need. Take us back to those days where, you yourself are navigating through this journey and you decide time to build a business.
Yeah. So the very first, so I was working at Postmates at the time. Food delivery startup is now part of Uber Eats. And I was talking to a coworker who is now my co-founder, Anne. And we were just kind of lamenting about all of the challenges of being a working mother of a young child. She actually had two babies at the time, and I had just had my first daughter. And we were just finding it really challenging. Like, how do people do this? How do they balance, taking care of a kid and working? And we were really excited to start something to help parents. We actually didn't know that it was going to be a childcare marketplace until years later, when we had built other stuff that didn't quite have product market fit. So we went down a long and windy path. And in retrospect, it's like, yeah, of course we should have built a childcare marketplace. That was the thing we were struggling with. But hindsight is 2020. We we didn't quite know how we were going to help parents, but we felt like there wasn't a lot of tech companies building things specifically for parents. I think now there's actually a lot more. And if this were, now, I think maybe we would have just joined one of these existing companies that is building great things for parents rather than start our own. I think neither of us saw ourselves as entrepreneurs. Like both of us were very happy working for someone else and doing work we felt was meaningful. We just started to feel like building something for parents would be the most meaningful thing we could do. And there was no one really doing it at the time. And so we were kind of like forced to start a company. I remember like when we first started, I was like, oh, we're going to have to decide like who wants to be CEO. And Anne was like, not me. I don't want to be CEO. I was like, I guess I'll do it. Sounds good. So we didn't have that mindset of like, we are people that are born to start a company. We were more motivated by, we wanted to build something.
10 years in, you are most certainly an entrepreneur. I mean, there's no denying that.
Yeah. A lot of like founders are like, I could never work for someone else now that I've gotten a taste of the freedom. And I'm like, no, I could certainly work for someone else. Like, it'd be really nice if someone just told me what to do every day. I would love that. So I still don't feel like a true entrepreneur.
When you go back to the early days, and this is very common, we had Jeff from Gaggle on, and he talked about where Gaggle is today. It's where it started was an almost completely different business. And this is common on enterprises with more than 5 years in age,
Yeah.
What were some of the earliest innovations you developed that you were certain would be successful and ultimately led you maybe down a different path?
So we started, Winnie, when it started, was not a childcare marketplace, but like an app to find things to do with your kids. And it was a free app. And so like people didn't like hate it, but it wasn't growing like on its own. And people would download it and then they would search for daycares and preschools, which were kind of like an afterthought that we like stuck in the app. And it took a long time before we were like, wait a minute, we should build this childcare marketplace because people are downloading our app and using it to search for childcare when we thought they would use it to search for like family-friendly restaurants or play spaces or things to do on the weekend. But it turns out everyone just needed childcare. Like all those other things were like nice to haves. But you need childcare so you can work. So it was actually my co-founder who kind of like built an early version of Winnie for just San Francisco where we lived. And like kind of put all the licensed childcare centers on a website and on a map and shared it in a Facebook group. And people were like, wow, this is amazing. This is super useful. And then we saw like people were sharing it on their own without us promoting it. We were like, wow, this is the first time that we've built something that people are actually using. Maybe we should work on this. So we kind of, it took a long time for us to part ways with the old thing. Something I always tell like founders today is like, that's all a sunk cost. If it's not working, like you gotta cut ties and move to the thing that is working. But we eventually figured out that we should not be working on anything else but the childcare marketplace.
And so as you develop the childcare marketplace, at some point, you clearly recognize that there's value here. The market is reflecting that either with adoption or revenue or both. In those days, you started in San Francisco. I mean, did you expand to California first and then across the country? Yeah. I mean, where you are today is almost universal.
Yes, we expanded very quickly, which is like not the kind of like VCs hated that. They realized like you should go city by city and really get density in a particular city. But because we integrated with all the state licensing databases, it was just pretty easy for us to say, like, we want to have national data everywhere. And so we quickly expanded to all of the United States. Now, even today, like some markets are obviously much bigger than others. Mm-hmm. If you go to a major city, on Winnie, like you'll find lots of childcare providers, and we probably have lots of parents searching for childcare in that city. And if you look in like a rural area, probably won't see lots of options, and we probably don't have a lot of parents searching in that area. So obviously not all markets are created equal, but we are national. And that was kind of for us, at least, a good way to get traction kind of pretty quickly. We still didn't make any money for a really long time. Like we didn't have a way of making money. We just built this marketplace and we made it free for parents and we made it free for childcare providers. And we did that for probably way too long. Like I wish we had made money sooner, but we wanted to kind of get the usage and build traction first. And it was actually like we brainstormed a list of like, how do we actually monetize this? Like, do we go the kind of like care.com route of like, you require parents to pay a membership to see information, or do we like charge childcare providers in some way? Kind of tested a bunch of things. But it was actually childcare providers coming to us and telling us that we were sending a lot of families to them. Could we like formalize the relationship? We were like, well, what did you have in mind? And they were like, how about we pay you like per center we list on your platform? We were like, that sounds amazing. Like, we'd love to do that. Turns out they got a really good deal for a really long time. So now we have a much more sophisticated business model, but that is kind of what got us the relationships early on with a lot of the bigger childcare enterprises. Is really, they came to us and were like, we see this is working. We want to make sure you stick around.
Was there ever a point in that journey where you thought this might not work?
Yeah, I mean, every day I'm like, I can't believe like I'm still doing this. It's still growing. Like, when is like this house of cards going to come crumbling down? But I think at this point we've just been through so many like things that almost killed us that we've like, now it's kind of like no challenge is too big. Like I remember when a few years ago now, like we were locked out of our bank account when the SVB crisis happened, and we thought like maybe we had lost all our money too. And then like that got figured out and all the money was back in our account like by the next day. And we were like, okay, like none of this stuff, we can just figure out a way around it. Even if we have lost every dollar in our bank account, we still have a valuable business and we'll just build it back up. So I think we've kind of become immune to that. Challenges don't really impact us the same way anymore.
I do talk about this concept of pressure. It somewhat evolves in maybe the most basic terms. You know, at some point in your life, maybe the SAT or ACT was like pressure, you know, or college algebra. And then you meet somebody maybe when you're preparing to graduate and they're like, oh, I'm so nervous about my first year's courses in college. And you're like almost nonchalant, you know, you'll be fine. I think the same is true in the founder's journey where, you know, pressure does change over time. You know, how we perceive pressure, what is in fact pressure. And to your point, I mean, you did wake up one day and lost everything in your bank.
Yeah.
And you woke up the next day and continue to run a business and continue to do the things you had to do to be an entrepreneur and to be a leader. And I think that really is emblematic of many of the folks that have built successful companies. And you clearly are finding a way, even in the most dynamic situations.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like that particular event was so good for us in the long term, because we literally thought like, what if we are just have $0 in our bank account? Because there was talks that like, you won't be able to get access to your funds for a long time. And maybe it's not insured. And like, you're such an idiot anyway for having all your money in one bank account. And I was like, okay, so what does this mean? Well, it means like we have to furlough all our employees because you can't like have people work for you and not pay them. So we'll do that. But like, we can still work on the business. And so then like, how long would we need to work on it to like build back up enough money to then like start paying people again. And like, who can we then bring back on? And we kind of had like worked out this whole plan. We were like, well, we could probably get some of our investors to give us a little bit of money. And so then we could bring these people on. We're like, wait a minute, like we don't actually need any of this money in our bank account. And that also was what like gave us the confidence to become profitable. And I feel like that was actually a thought exercise I would have never done, but was super valuable. And so now we actually do that a lot. We're like, let's just start from nothing. And what do we actually need to run this business? And is everyone that's working for the company actually working on the most important things? Like, because we don't necessarily need, just because we have been doing something or we hired someone to do one job, doesn't mean it's still the most important thing for them to be doing. And so like, let's just reset and make sure it's still what we want.
The fundraising process, it can be treacherous. And in some cases, for many founders, value destructive in that they take their eye off the ball. It is essentially a full-time job to raise funds, and as an investor, I meet many of these companies and I'm frequent to just remind them like your job is to run the business, not the other way around, serving the investors constantly. What was your experience raising funds, kind of going through that journey as a founder? Would you do it again?
Yeah. I mean, I dislike the fundraising process for all the reasons you mentioned. Like, I do think it sometimes runs opposite to value creation in the business. I remember there was a time period when like a certain kind of business model was really sexy with investors. And we were like, okay, like we have to like change our business to be that business model so we can raise money. And we like sort of did, but then like our growth really wasn't doing as well. And we were like, wait a minute, like we've raised the money. Now we have to do what works for the business. And it's like, it may not be the sexiest thing to investors. And now, by the way, like they hate that old like SaaS business model anyway. And so they're like, no, that it's good that you're not doing that anymore. SaaS is dead. So, like we just really feel like if we can build for our customers, that takes us in the right direction. And so we would much rather now, like if we can fund something through our customers or through being profitable, we would much rather fund it that way than to try to go out and raise money, because a lot of times what investors are looking for is just something completely random and not actually going to help with our growth. That said, like, there's also no way we would be where we are at now if we hadn't raised the money we raised. Mm-hmm. And so I do think some amount of fundraising was necessary, but now that we're profitable, like we just waste no time with raising money. There'd have to be some like really big bet I was so convinced of that required some kind of massive upfront investment that we couldn't have made on our own. Mm-hmm. That would make me go out and try to raise money again. Just hated it.
One of the things as an entrepreneur that we find is that, our work, our mission becomes our lives. And what people don't see is how much that takes, what that really requires to run these businesses. They see us in a modality, maybe on LinkedIn or at a conference, but what it takes to sign the front of a check and not the back of one. How is it that you unplug? How do you recharge?
I don't. Well, I do think like my co-founder and I were intentional when we started Winnie that we wanted this. We knew that startups take a while to be successful. I don't think we thought we would be working on this for 10 plus years, but we knew it'd be a while. It turns out it's even longer than we thought. But we wanted to do this in a way that was sustainable for us so that like we weren't going to just go work 24/7 for the first year and then run out of steam. So I do think we are thoughtful about, how we build this business. Like I don't frequently work on the weekends. I do if I need to. And of course, like the buck stops with me. So a lot of times I have to check in or answer a customer or do something, but I try not to work on the weekends because I want to be able to do this for a long time, as long as it takes. If it's the rest of my life, like if this is the last job I have, then I want to see it through. And we're still nowhere near, achieving the vision we want to achieve. So we have a long way to go. But I mean, for me, I don't do the thing where like, I know there's definitely some people where it works for them to like go really hard and then take a sabbatical and then go really hard again and then take another sabbatical. Like that doesn't work well with my life. Like I have 3 kids. They have needs all the time. And so like, I can't just be like, oh, for the next 6 months, I'm not going to see you guys. And then I'll spend a few weeks like dedicated to you. Like they don't even have that time either. They have lives. So I've just found it's better to kind of like manage it as I go. And that means I'm never really ever completely offline. Like I think a couple years ago I had surgery and I knew I was going to be under anesthesia for like 6 hours. So that was like the first time I was like, I will actually be unreachable until the anesthesia wears off. But like other than that, I'm pretty much always reachable unless like my flight doesn't have internet or something. And that just works for me. Then I don't ever feel like like as long as I have some balance between I'm available, but I'm not always working. I don't feel like I need to take like a 1-month sabbatical to like regain my, get my life back or whatever.
As an entrepreneur, what's something that people don't see about you?
I mean, I think I am really transparent. I'm probably like a little too transparent. Like I tend to overshare. I'm pretty much an open book about like I don't have a good kind of boundary separation between like my life and my work. Like if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm like constantly talking about topics related to raising kids and work. And so I think like that has actually served me pretty well because like I said, then I don't feel this need to like, if I'm never, even when I'm working, I know that, if there's an emergency at school, I can be there and go pick up my kids. Or likewise, if I'm with my kids and there's an emergency at work, like I have that flexibility. Also, my husband works for Winnie too. So it truly is a family business. It's nice because I don't feel like I need to hide any parts of myself. In any situation and it allows it to be like really sustainable for me long term. So I think people are often surprised that I am not super stressed running this company. Maybe my investors would wish I were a little more stressed. But like I actually don't really find it very stressful because I've kind of set up my life to make this work.
That is so refreshing in the sense of many times the playbook that we both received was, I don't know, a caricature of what it means to be a leader, right? This eat nails, intense, no breaks, rest is weakness kind of mentality. At least that was my early days in, joining the club.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of people that can last at that pace for your tenure. And if they do, it's at a cost of a relationship, their health,
right?
Or frankly, both simultaneous.
Yeah. And I also feel, and I tell this to my team too, like I know when I stay up all night because I'm working on something, then the next day I'm just like worthless. Like I'm so tired and I'm like, I might be working long hours, but not getting anything done. But if I get the proper amount of sleep and if I exercise, like I am like superwoman. And so I will stop in the middle of the day and I will go for a run, or now I'm really into like walking with my weighted vest. And like, yeah, maybe I'm taking like an hour out of my day when I should be working, but I literally like come back from that with like 10 ideas and I'm like executing a lot faster. And so I tell my team too, like, if you need to recharge, like, go get some exercise, go take a nap. And they'll, like, sometimes people post in Slack, like, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to take a nap. It's not seen as a bad thing because I know, like, that's just how the brain works. Like, you need to, I mean, some people don't need as much rest or as much physical activity, but I definitely do. And I could see that, like, I'm a much better worker when I get that.
This is a completely different way to run a business. And Sara, there's no surprise of why you've succeeded. Let me ask you this. When you dream, what does Winnie look like?
Yeah. So I think one of the kind of steps we took this year is we actually expanded to K-12 on Winnie. So we added schools, private schools, public schools, charter schools, all kinds of schooling options, because we see, childcare and early education as just like the first step on a child's educational journey, which is actually, like, that's one big part of my dream. Is like it becomes easy to find not just your full-time daycare when your kid is 0 to 5, but also their school and their camps and their tutoring and their after-school care or classes in one place. And you can kind of get all the magic that we have with searching for daycares and preschools, where you can contact them all and even book your tour and one day hopefully book your camp or your after-school care in one place on one platform. That's kind of where we see Winnie going. And so we're kind of like starting to take steps in that direction by adding K-12 schools, by, camps is becoming a bigger part of our business. After school care is becoming a bigger part of our business, but there's a lot left to do. That's definitely like the grand vision, is to be more than just daycare and preschool.
It's amazing. Sara, we get all of our guests out what we call our fast four. So there's just like right off top of your head, just quick responses. First thing that comes to mind. Are you ready?
Oh, God. Sure.
As an entrepreneur, what trends are emerging that interest you?
Definitely AI. I mean, we are spending a lot of time with Winnie figuring out how we can run our business more efficiently with AI, how we can help our customers using AI. Like, we have this kind of AI first initiative this quarter. So anything we want to do, we have to think about how we use AI to do it first. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes we can't. But that has been so enlightening. And I think that's like, we're just at the tip of the iceberg there.
One place in the world everyone needs to visit.
Philadelphia. It's where I'm from.
That is a by far first for the show.
It is like the most underrated city in the world, except for people from Philly, they know. But it has like all the culture and history of, like, in fact, more than like a New York City. Its museums and its rich history. It has incredible, incredible food. It has the world's best sports teams. It's a way more affordable city than a lot of cities in the world. Like, it's just got everything.
Greatest area of growth for you in the coming year?
Gosh, hopefully not my weight. Hopefully that's not growing. Oh boy, greatest area of growth. I mean, I think I am hoping to spend a lot more time this coming year in person with customers, which we are a fully remote company. And so it is just so easy for me to be like, sure, we'll do a Zoom, or like, we'll send you an email. And every time I meet customers or prospective customers in person, it just like unlocks a million things. We solve problems faster. We think of new features faster. And so I'm just like forcing myself to get on a plane more and meet people in real life.
I love it. And favorite podcast that everyone needs to be listening to?
Oh, I have my like guilty pleasure is I listen to every like murder podcast. That's like all I do is listen to like why people were killed, which my husband makes fun of me for. But besides, and I listen to all the Philly sports podcasts. Oh, I know all the hacks. It is like by my friend Chris Hutchins. This is like his full-time job is this podcast and all the associated materials. It is like the best. It's just hacks for everything in life, like airline miles, credit card points, like how to be happier, how to make more money. Like every episode, I just feel like it's an hour and I get just the deep dive that I would have taken me weeks to research myself. So that is, if you're not into murders, all the hacks.
Sara, thank you for an incredible story and for building an incredible business. As a parent, we're better for a service like Winnie, and we wish you incredible success along your journey. Thank you for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining today's episode of Capital Class. If you're interested in joining our next discussion, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. Capital Class is a venture with the Strategist Podcast Network. To view the entire lineup of shows, visit strategistgroup.com. I'm Adam Geary. Class is closed.